Hi, and welcome to The Grief Between Us. I'm Patti Merrill, chaplain and founder of The Waiting Place, a nonprofit grief center dedicated to creating space for honest conversations about loss, love, and the complicated journey of healing. I'm really grateful you're here. Whether you're grieving yourself, supporting someone you love, or simply wanting to better understand the human experience of loss, this podcast is a place where grief can be spoken about openly and listened to with compassion. So, wherever you are today, thank you for joining me. Let's begin. Today, I am joined by John, a divorced father living in Wyoming whose grief isn't tied to death, but to the loss of his family as he once knew it, and the loss of the hopes that he carried for having a family that would last. John names his grief honestly, mourning what was and what he hoped would be, while also navigating the pain of having his own agency and his children's limited by the choices of others. John is a faithful disciple of Christ, a devoted dad, and someone who has wrestled deeply with mental health challenges. Out of that wrestling, he started his own business. It's called Rayvoro. And it's not just an apparel brand, but he started it as a way to support others with practical coping skills and a sense that they're not alone. John agreed to this conversation today because he believes that there are things in his story that matter, especially for other parents that are carrying quiet, ongoing grief. I'm really grateful that John's here with me today, and I'm really grateful that each of you are here with me today for this conversation. I think that you'll find that this is time well spent. So, John, before we dive in, I'd like to hear when you think about your grief right now and how it shows up in your life, what feels most active or tender for you right now?
The thing that feels the most tender for me is actually being alone because although I know I'm not alone, I'm still alone at the same time. And I think for a lot of people, you're like, I know I'm not alone. So and so went through this, so and so went through that. But you still, I still come home to an empty home. I don't, I'll never have my kids unless I get 50% custody. I'm like, I'll never come home from work and see my kids like at my house. I go visit them and take them to Burger King at 6:30 at night every Tuesday. But it's actually being physically alone. That's kind of the hardest thing for me.
Yeah. How do you cope with that? How do you get through each day?
I watch TV and scrolling, which is not great. But the funny thing is that my algorithm for Instagram, at least for my personal account, is all funny stuff. So sometimes I'll scroll, I'm like, I just need something funny today. So if I can just laugh, and sometimes I'm just laughing and I fill my whole entire house with laughter because I'm laughing at some random video. So that's one thing that is like medicine for me is just finding something to laugh about in the day.
Yeah. It wasn't very long ago that I spent some time with your mom and we laughed. I laughed so hard. And it was the first time that I'd laughed that hard for a long time. And I remember thinking, I didn't realize that that's what I needed was a
Mhm.
good laugh, and just to release. And I've come to believe that laughter is probably just as cathartic as crying when
Mhm.
it comes to releasing all of that emotion that gets welled up inside of us. So good for you. That's beautiful. So I have some different questions here, and we've talked about some of them, but um, let's talk for a minute about before everything changed, like before the divorce, before the separation. How did you understand yourself as a father and as a husband? What did that role look like for you?
Well, before we got separated, I actually didn't think that I had value as a father. I The year before we were separated, or at least before we moved to Wyoming, I wasn't celebrated for Father's Day. I remember hating Father's Day. It was Father's Day right before we had our second child. And instead of allowing her mother to go get food for us, she went and had me on Father's Day go get everybody food because she was more sensitive to her mom that was traveling for 4 hours. And I understood, but it was hard to not feel celebrated. And then fast forward, we moved to Wyoming and I just continued to feel devalued as a father that and we were living with I was living with my in-laws at the time, and so I was like, "If I were to go away, just not exist anymore, I think my kids would be okay." They have their grandparents, they have their mom, and for months prior to the separation, I wanted to die. I didn't feel like me living or being a father was important for my children. I just felt like my kids were better off without me or they would be okay without me. So my pain that I had in the marriage, if I just let it go away, then and I went away, then my kids would be okay. And I came to realize when I rediscovered myself and stopped being so codependent on her and allowing her to impact my emotions. I'm like, now I can be happy even when I'm alone. I can be fulfilled even by myself because I have my own career, I have my own life, I rent my own apartment, and I can see what it's like to be a dad. I can see the impact that I have being a father in my children's life because I could see what impact it has when they're away from me. So now I'm like, I have to stay. I have to be here for my children. And I live to be their dad. And I'm like, I'm important. And I'm important to me and I'm important to my children now.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that and for trusting us with that, John. It sounds like it was a very heavy and hard time to get through, and I'm personally grateful that you got through it. Thank you for hanging in there. Let me take you back even a little bit further. Before you were married, even, what did you imagine fatherhood would be like? And marriage, like marriage and fatherhood.
I think I just, that's hard to answer. It's so long ago because I feel like I just wanted I don't even know if I wanted anything specific as a father. I just knew I wanted to be a part of it. Like I just wanted that for me, which is weird. I think before marriage, I wanted fatherhood and marriage for me.
Okay.
And because that's what like, oh, I want a father, I want children, I
Yeah.
want a wife.
Yeah.
But, fast forward and it's like doing it for you almost you lose the whole purpose of it because the joy that I get is doing it for my children and watching them benefit. And that's what makes me happy. And I'm like, even being a husband, I think it would have benefited me to be like, okay, I'm doing it for her. She's not here for me. I'm here for her. And watching her be happy would have made me happy because not that I have to like sacrifice myself to appease her, but just the purpose of it before being married is like, I want a wife and I want kids. But once, fast forward to after the divorce, and I'm like, I do this for my children and it makes me happier than I would have been doing it for myself.
Yeah. I think it says a lot about you that you've been able to come to that place now, even in the middle of such hard situation, that you can have joy and happiness in this situation and that you've come to recognize for yourself where that joy comes from. When your marriage ended, what do you think changed most dramatically in your life?
It was it was actually becoming independent because the thing that changed for me was that being alone, you have to learn who you are by yourself. You don't have somebody to pick up where you fall short. Like you fall short if you fall short. The biggest impact was that I had to do everything by myself. But only physically. That's the weird thing is that physically I was by myself. I had to go to work by myself, wake myself up for work, do everything by myself. But support wise, I had so much support from my parents, and I realized that I have a village. So where I'm not really like I'm by myself physically, and now I'm my own singular family when I don't have my children. Half the time, more than half the time, I'm by myself. But the biggest thing that changed for me was realizing that I had to figure out how to be by myself, but also rely on people all around me, like my parents that they've been supportive, and I've I've had to call my parents a lot, and the family. I talk on the phone with my friends for hours sometimes, and I have to, grow my village a little bit than just the family unit. Like I think being alone has been the biggest impact for me.
Yeah, and it sounds also too like, it's a process to learn how to allow your community to grow, how to, it takes a village. You've referenced that, and you've had to go through this process of learning how to grow that village and keep safe people close by. There's a lot of things that you lost in this process. What did you lose that surprised you the most?
I think what I lost was feeling like I had a choice in the matter, because when you're married, there's a lot of actions that you think that like you're a partnership, like you're both choosing to be there. But the funny thing is that when I lost her choosing to stay in the relationship, I realized that I never had that choice. I never could force her to stay the whole time. So I what I realize is that I can only choose what I can do. Like I can choose to stay, I can choose to try to apologize and make amends. But what I lost is the idea that I actually had a choice over somebody else's actions, and I never did the whole way along.
And that causes a rupture, doesn't it? I
Mhm.
mean, there's a rupture that you realize that, like, you never had that choice all along, but you thought you did, and so losing that still impacts you. It still brings grief into the picture, right? Just because you lost something that you never really had, your system registers it as loss,
Mhm.
and so your system grieves because of that. Yeah. When people talk about divorce, you know that there's grief involved. I think on a certain level, other people know that there's going to be grief involved with a divorce situation. But what do you think gets overlooked, especially for the dad? Like, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode with you, um, is because I think society holds this idea that when the divorce happens, we got to take care of the single moms. But what gets overlooked about the dads?
I think the hard thing that people don't realize is that the reason why the men get kind of the short end of the stick is it's unfair, but it's almost fair at the same time, is that men are supposed to make the income. And if I had 50% of custody with my children, they'd be in daycare all day, right? So part of it is that I'm like, if I go to work, I don't get my kids, but I also have to go to work so that I can send child support. And if she was making all this money then maybe things would be different. And it's weird because like I think the thing that gets overlooked is that men get treated as the almost like the enemy, but really like you have to figure out a balance because I'm like the bills have to get paid, but at the same time like it's not that we don't deserve to or that we did anything wrong to not see our children. It's just that like the dynamics right now just don't allow for me to have 50% custody right now, having to work every day. Um so I think the hard thing is that having that dynamic of like, okay, the man works and The woman has to nurture and take care of them, and even if, she works, like but I think the thing that gets overlooked the greatest is that we didn't do anything wrong. Like, the man is usually considered they're more easily believing to be the abusive person right off the bat. So a woman can say, "Oh, they did this to me, they did that to me," and they're believed. But if a man says, "Oh, she did this to me, she did that to me," it's almost like, "Well, so what? Like, you're the man. Like, it doesn't matter as much."
That's a hard thing to hold. I would think, like, society imposes this framework that isn't accurate all the time. Sometimes, not always, right? And yet you're forced to live within that framework that's not accurate. Hey, sorry to interrupt. This is Patty. Just before we continue, I want to share something briefly. As the founder of The Waiting Place, a nonprofit grief center created to support people as they navigate loss, and as a chaplain, one of the ways that I offer support is through grief companionship, which means I'm simply walking alongside people in their grief journey with compassion, listening, and spiritual care. If you or someone you love could use that kind of support, you can visit thewaitingplacefoundation.org, go to the community tab, and then click on programs and services to learn more. Or you can go directly to the contact page to reach out. It would be my privilege to sit with you in that sacred space and accompany you. So tell me if you can describe a little bit for us to understand what it's like to grieve while you still have to show up and function. Like, you still have to go to work, you still have to function, you still are showing up and being there for your kids when you can, and having fun with them, and doing these things. And yet you still have all this grief. What's it like to kind of navigate both of those things?
I would say it's almost a badge of honor because once I realized, like, man, sometimes I'm alone, and when I drop my kids off and they're crying, I just want to stay with dad or I'm going to miss dad. And you know, I get in my car and sometimes I cry and I'm like, man, this sucks. But it's that at the same time, like, my kids love me. My kids want me in their life. But having to show up and be a stable person emotionally for them and then have them function and be able to have all of the things that they love and enjoy in their life, having to bear a lot of that burden, it's almost like, man, I bear this weight of grief, but it doesn't affect my children. So I feel like functionally, if we're able to bring that function to dysfunction or bring, order to something that's disorder, then it's really boosts your confidence because this is stuff that could really tear you down. And like, I feel like even, the adversary, Satan, would want it to destroy you because he wants to destroy the family unit. And now it's like he wants to destroy you because if he could remove a father or even a mother, like he can remove either one of you, then just a single mother by herself or just a single father by himself. I'm like, it's it doesn't benefit the child at all to have just one or the other, for all that time. So I'm like, if he can just try to remove somebody from one of their lives growing up and having that support, then I feel like he wins. So for me, it's been a badge of honor to be able to show up for my children, even though this is something that should tear me up inside, that should destroy me.
What I hear in what you're saying too, John, is protective language. Like, I hear you, there's undertones of protecting your children emotionally, but also physically from the effects of what's happened from this rupture. Have you thought about, like, is that how you think of it? That you're
Yeah.
protecting them? And what are some specific things that you've thought, I need to do this in order to protect my kids? emotionally or spiritually?
So spiritually, I have to make sure that I'm not allowing anger or things in my home. I've had to make sure that I don't. It's very interesting after you get divorced. Like, I feel like your kids are a lot more sensitive, and I've had to be more sensitive to them, like more than ever, because they have a lot of big emotions. And so I have to be not only a stable person for them, but I also can't erupt on them at all. Like, it's just not something that I've done with my children. My children know that they're safe with dad emotionally, physically, even when we go to the store. Like, I have to, if I go to the store and then go to the post office and then go somewhere else, then I have to take my kids in and out of the car a lot. And so we have a whole routine. Like, I have to take my daughter out who's younger, and then um, I, make sure that I can keep somebody protected in my arms, and the other is like, okay, you've got to stay next to the car because I have to be able to see you. I've even used stickers. I'm like, I gave him stickers so he can put on my gas tank. So he'll open up the latch on my gas store and put stickers there. Like, when you're a single parent, you have to do stuff like that to protect your children. And even if it's just like going through the motions, like, I live in a pretty safe area, but it's just the fact that I can't let my guard down physically for my children and keeping them physically safe, but also emotionally, I can't erupt and yell at my children because they see all of that. It impacts them, and right now they are in a sensitive time in their life where I'm like, I need to show up as a emotionally stable person for them.
So that just makes me think too, like you're so focused on keeping them safe and protecting them, and that comes from being able to do this from a space of health, emotional health of yourself, being grounded. In order to show up in the way that you talk about showing up for your kids as grounded and safe and keeping an eye on them and not erupting emotionally, what do you do to make sure that you can show up that way? How do you protect your own emotions?
As far as like our emotions go, like, you almost have to fake it till you make it. And it's as weird as it is, like there's this interesting practice that you can do is if you say like ha or ha ha, and like you can force yourself to laugh if you say ha ha so many times. And because then all of a sudden you're like, ha ha, like, this sounds ridiculous. This is like obnoxious. And then all of a sudden you're laughing at yourself because of how obnoxious you are and how stupid this is. But if you can put in your head that, okay, this is what I think needs to happen, you can almost fake it until you make it, because it's almost like you have the outcome and you start applying the outcome, and then everything behind the outcome just supports it. Your brain will create a narrative to support the outcome that you think needs to happen. So if I think like I need to be safe, I need to be emotionally grounded, then all of a sudden I might sleep all day on the weekend, or I might call up my friend and we're talking from midnight to 2 in the morning, or I'm, watching TV or scrolling, or I go on a jog, or, sometimes I need to go get some food and like some junk food just to help me to just have an outlet besides just wallowing. I'll just go to the store and get some junk food just to emotionally, feed myself, even though you feel crappy at the end of the day. But your brain will will fill in the blanks. So like, this is your outcome. This is what you're pretending to be, this is what you're doing, like, you're actually doing the outcome. But then your brain will fill in the parts of why that outcome, it proves that outcome. Well, in order to prove this facade that you're creating, like, I actually have to have structure behind this facade to keep this facade from crumbling. I remember in Provo, I walked by a building, and the front of it was just a wall in the front. And I looked in the window, and there was no building behind it. It was the facade was being held up by the buildings around it. So I'm like, they had to take down they gutted the building, but it looked from the front, it looked like a regular building, and then they rebuilt the building behind it. So I'm like, if you keep the facade, I mean, it seems fake. Like, if you take that facade away and you just see an empty shell, like, that's what people see. That's vulnerability, is seeing the inside of it and saying, "Hey, I'm not necessarily like, empty shell inside, but for my children, to protect my children, like, they have to have a functional facade that, I might be depressed, or I might be sad or resentful at times or angry, but they don't see me be angry. They don't see me sad unless, I'm able to share that with them. That's a vulnerability. Like, um, even if what makes them sad makes me sad. So sometimes I'll share their sadness with them and I'll say, "Oh, you miss me? Like, I miss you too." That's almost like a protection. That's a barrier for them to protect them. Um, there's still, obviously, vulnerabilities that you can share with themselves. Because I looked inside the window and was able to see that empty shell. Sometimes you let people in and you let people see what's inside.
Yeah.
Functionally, I think I have to show up for my children, go to work, and still have some kind of functionality to, what's going on inside.
Yeah. I love what you're saying. And what I'm hearing too is that, like, your children are not the people who needs to see behind that facade yet. Like,
Mhm.
that's not age appropriate, and it's not going to be beneficial to the relationship of the father child relationship. Now, that might change as time goes by, right? As they grow up and they start to see things and their brain starts to understand things differently. But they're at a young age where you don't and I think this is so wise that you recognize that they should not have to carry the weight of that right now. That's not what they need to do. And so
Yeah.
you protect them from that. But it also makes me wanna ask John, like, because, because I love you and because I care, and I want to make sure that you do have safe places and people in your life where you can let them come around that wall and see the true authentic grieving that you hold.
Yeah. Um, oh, and it's funny that you say that, because I actually went around the building and you could see the whole emptiness on the other side of the building, but it was under construction. And
Yeah.
so part of me, it's like, from the front, like, my kids, they see stability from the front, but from behind, I'm rebuilding. And
Yes,
it's okay to
rebuilding.
bring in your contractor and your therapist and your somebody to talk to and your friends and say, "Hey, I need permits pulled. I need a new career. I need a new mantra. I need new outlets, new coping mechanisms. I need new structure behind the facade." But from the front, like, I can't, my children see a stabilities. They won't know the work that went into rebuilding myself from the inside. So the confidence, the not being codependent, the therapy, all of those things, like, I'm rebuilding behind this facade, but they won't understand how much better I am on the inside, because from the front, they just have to see dad, and they just have to see, fun, loving, supportive, and stable dad, even though I'm like, "Hey, I'm under construction still on the inside."
'Cause we all are, right? We
Mhm.
all are under
Yep.
construction. So, if you were looking not at me, but somebody else who is in a similar position as you, having gone through some of the things, so another father or another grieving person who's listening and feels unseen in their grief, what would you want them to know? Like, what somebody else is saying, "And yeah, I just feel like I'm so fake because I can't let anybody understand nobody understands the grief that I'm feeling." How do you cope with that? What would you wanna say to somebody like that?
So, like, learning about vulnerabilities is, when you say your vulnerabilities out loud, or when you're able to share your vulnerabilities with others, it makes me, or you're basically saying, like, "Hey, you're not, you're sharing the weak parts of you," right? So if as a father, like somebody going through what I'm going through, like I feel like you have to understand that there's other people that behind the facade that are going through a reconstruction process too, that have found a lot of structural problems sometimes that have to rebuild and have to rip stuff out and put stuff in. And so I wish that people understood that even though you seemingly are physically alone, like you might be alone in your small town, you might be in a big town with no family, or you might not feel seen by the people around you because they see the front part of the building, they see the facade, but you don't feel like there's anybody that's helping you reconstruct. I'm like, the biggest advice that I would have is to allow people behind to help you reconstruct because you're never going to rebuild something of value by yourself. Every single thing, any big project that exists on this planet was done with two or more people. At least allow one person to help you rebuild that has more experience than you too. Because forget what book I read, I think it was Rich Dad Poor Dad. He said the smartest people hire people that are smarter than them, because if I was a smart business person, I'm going to hire the best contractor, the best engineer. And so, even if you were to bring on somebody that has gone through the same grief as you, you're like, you've gone through this. I need you to help me to reconstruct because you've had to rebuild. So, I need your experience. So, I wish that people understood that it's okay to have a facade and to show up for work and stuff, but allow people behind to help you rebuild. You need somebody. You need a therapist. You need a safe place to be able to share your emotions, even if it's, you know, you have people around you. You might be surrounded by loved ones, but you need somebody that's safe that you could be vulnerable with, because the vulnerability is almost like it's letting your guard down, right? It's like you have all this armor on. Well, to be vulnerable, like to be able to, go and, you know, um, I don't know. It's like having somebody having your six. Like if you take off all your armor because you need to change or go bathe in the river or whatever, like you've got to take all your armor off. You need to make sure that you have other people around you, that the enemy's not going to come and attack you. So being vulnerable is being able to take off all that armor around somebody, be able to share all of your insecurities. Sometimes, as weird as it is, sometimes your spouse is not the person to be vulnerable with, because sometimes they're the ones that's also attacking you. So sometimes you need a therapist to say, hey, this is how I feel. So every single person needs a person they can be vulnerable with.
Yeah, we need that village. Some of what you were saying too reminded me of something that C.S. Lewis describes, and it's one of my favorite books. And it's in the book Mere Christianity, and he talks about how like you're building this house, and you kind of think you have this idea of what this house is going to be, and maybe it's a cute little cottage or whatever. But after some time, you start thinking like, wait, what is going on? Because this hurts way more than what I thought it was going to hurt. This is way harder than I thought it was gonna be, and then we realize that God, who is the main architect, and, Jesus Christ, who is, like, the construction, right? He's the, contractor. They're not building a little cottage. They're building a palace, and that palace is someplace that they intend to be able to come and live with us, and I just thought of that while you were talking about how we bring in all of these different people to help us. And you got to pull those permits, and you got to make sure that you're hiring the right people to come in and help you and create this village that you want to have. And I just love that metaphor that you brought in and developed so beautifully. Before we close, I have like one more question. I want to talk a little bit about your business, Revoro. You're passionate about this, and it's not necessarily the clothing. Like, you started it out as an apparel and business, but what is it really? What is Rave Oral?
I want Revora to be a community, and the I want people to share their story and to share their vulnerabilities so that we can have that community. But so my motto is let's continue with a semicolon. And it I want people to be able to share, let's continue semicolon, just whatever, because the continuing part is whatever we're doing together. But instead of like I continued or, just to continue, I wanted it to be let's continue. Like me and you, like we're going to continue together. Like me and this other single dad who's going through a divorce or who's divorced, then it's like, let's continue showing up for our children together. Let's continue to go to work and rebuild ourselves together, right? Like that. We don't have to be alone, even if we're physically alone. We don't have to be alone in our support.
That's so beautiful. And John, if it's okay with you, like when we create the show notes for this, I'd like to include a link that people can find you on
Mhm.
social media or your website and things like that. Because I think that it's a beautiful thing that you're creating that kind of a community and not just for men, but for everybody, right? Yeah, that's so beautiful. So before we end, what feels important to say that maybe we haven't yet said? Is there anything on your heart and mind that you're like want to share?
Um,
I can give you a prompt.
yeah, that would be great.
I've just been watching you this whole time with just over your shoulder this painting of the Savior. Can you speak just for a moment of what the Savior in your life means to you?
I needed my brother through this. And the real thing is realizing that's my brother. Like he's got my back. I do want to share one thing about the Lord. Even when we don't feel the light of Christ, we don't feel the love of God, his light and love is all around us. It surrounds us every day, every night. It's always there. His love is encompassing, just like the air we breathe is always around us. But acknowledging the love of God is like sometimes we just shut our eyes and we close our ears to hearing or seeing that love. But it's something we will never, ever escape from. No matter what we do, no matter what sins we've gone through or done, or how many mistakes we feel like we've made, whether that's, in the marriage, whether that's in life, whatever mistakes that we feel like we've made, we'll never escape the love of Jesus Christ and the love of our Father in heaven. So I've needed that love. And even sometimes you feel still alone, but you're never alone. This actually is the poem Footprints in the Sand. So the one thing that I've realized is that even when I feel alone, I know having the knowledge that I'm not alone and that even when I can't see God, when I can't feel God, I'm never alone. I want to share one more thing. Lately, because I've been feeling kind of bleh lately, just, in my natural ups and downs of life, I prayed recently that I could feel or I can just see some wildlife because I just love seeing wildlife. It's just one of those like signs that God is there, like that He is powerful enough. And yesterday, I was walking and I saw a moose just off the side of the road. And I was on this big property. It was like $100 million property. But I was just walking and I saw a moose. And the next day, I was driving to work and I see a whole herd of elk on the side of the road driving to work.
That's
And the funny thing is, I prayed again. I said, Heavenly Father, like, I just love seeing all this wildlife. Like, can you just like show me more wildlife? I know I see you there, right? And I get home from work and I couldn't park my car because in my front driveway was a deer. And I was like, I can't even pull in my car because there was a deer in my driveway. So I parked my car south of my driveway, just below my driveway. And, I'd walked into my house, I saw a deer 20 feet away. But I'm like, literally, we cannot escape the love Heavenly Father has for us. So even when we don't see it, we can always pray to feel his love because it will, if we look for it, it will always be there and it will always show up for us.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that experience and your testimony and your love for our Savior. It is so powerful and it's so beautiful. And thank you for sharing this time with me today, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I didn't say this before, but and many of our listeners won't know this, but I've known you all your life, and that's such a privilege to to be able to say that. You are an amazing young man, who's gone through some really hard things. And you're inspiring to be able to be a witness of how you're surviving and not just surviving, but thriving through this really, really hard thing. I love you, John.
Yeah, Patty, and you've always been family, a real family to me. So
Yeah.
even though we're not blood related, that
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
I appreciate that. It's a privilege to be part of your life. And I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I hope that this episode and these things have been helpful because it's helped me. And honestly, if in the end that's all that comes out of this, is you've strengthened me, you've given me courage and hope and strength for another day. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do.
Yeah, it's fun. It's been fun. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today on The Grief Between Us. If this episode and the things we talked about resonated with you, I would be so grateful if you shared the podcast with someone else who you think might enjoy listening to it. The more these conversations are shared, the more we can help create spaces where grief is understood rather than avoided. Until next time, take gentle care of your heart.